Hi, and welcome everybody to this Unite Now session for our Indies XP series. My name is Clement. I am the lead marketing artist for the Game Growth Program, which is an acceleration program for indie games within Unity. And today with me, I have two amazing guests. First, we have Jan Sawicki-Hughes, who is the growth manager at Tripledot. Jan, can you tell us a bit more, please?
Yeah, hi, pleasure to be here. I'm Jan from Tripledot. I'm the growth marketing manager there. And we are a mobile gaming independent studio based here in London. And we specialize in games of a classic nature. So our biggest game is Solitaire and Udoku.
Thanks a lot. And we also have with us Steve Chard, who is the CEO and co-founder of Luna Labs. So, Stephen?
Hey guys, pleased to be here. Luna is a creative platform to really empower any developer who wants to get successful with creative. We've built some interesting technology for those who use Unity. So yeah, looking forward to this.
Really happy to have both of you with me today. Thanks a lot. So today, as you know, we're going to address the subject of how to get creative with creatives, which is essentially how do you optimize and prioritize the production of any creative asset that you will need to promote your game. So basically, we will go from the moment you actually finished your game up to the moment that you start to promote it in an efficient way. And we will help you understand all the necessary steps for you to promote your game in an efficient and profitable manner. So as we said, once your game is finished, and this is, hours and hours of work and dedication, this is not the end. This is just the beginning of the adventure. And this adventure means promotion, and promotion means creative assets. We know that you have limited resources. You don't have that much time. You don't have a huge budget, and you definitely don't have like so many colleagues working with you because this is the indie developers world. So today we will really keep in mind your reality, your day-to-day, and we will focus on producing on what it is to produce creative assets to promote a game. So to begin with, it is very important to stress that it is not optional. You need to promote your game, and to promote your game, you do absolutely need creative assets. So it will be time consuming, but it's a necessity. The two things you need to bear in mind. The first one is you need to have your store pages ready for when your game is ready to launch, which means that you need to have a couple of assets, which we will look into later in the presentation, ready and optimized. Then once all of your pages are, or depending on which store you are targeting, if it's just one or the other or both, once your pages are done, you want to start promoting your game, which means you need people everywhere in the world to know about your game. The reason why you have to go into this order is because obviously once you attract people and you acquire them, they will get on their landing page will actually be the store pages, right? So you want to make sure that whatever is on your landing page, your store pages, is just the best way to feature your game. Because as indie developers, on a day-to-day basis, and probably for the past couple of months, maybe years, that everything is about prioritizing because you cannot do everything. The must-haves are much more important than the nice-to-haves. Here is a list of creative assets that you will definitely need to produce, and this is the minimum requirement. So we would have an app icon, a logo type, some screenshots, and a store trailer, and these would be the elements you need for your app store optimization. This is what you need on your store page, right? But then the fifth element would be the UA as videos. Ideally, if you could produce between 1 and 3 videos, that would be great. If you have more time, this is even better, because if you have more time, more resources, more budget, feel free to create as many as you like. And there's a reason to this, right, Jan?
Yeah, absolutely. I just wanted to kind of iterate a bit more on the points of, and I think this is a nice way to say it, it's not a nice to have, it's a must have. And in order to be able to have a bit of more understanding on what performs well, you need to test your icon. You need to be able to look at your screenshots, decide the order of the screenshots, because at the end of the day, the user is going to go into the App Store and they're going to basically quickly look at your store and they need to decide to download that game based on that information. So I think that's why it's so important.
All right, thanks a lot. So to get into the actual production of your creative assets, here is a 5-step creative process that will help you understand all the necessary steps to produce these assets, but also the two main point of focus you want to keep in mind when you do this. So the first one is you want to build some informed assumptions about your creatives, which means that before you even start brainstorming or ideating, you need to have analysis of the market. That is the step one, which is basically the benchmark. You look at all of your competitors and you look at the ads that they use for their own user acquisition, and you try to understand what are the trends out there. If there are some trends, you can note down some concepts that you think are interesting, relevant, or are catchy. But do make sure you do your homework. And you have a couple of tools out there, such as the Facebook ad library. It's a free tool, and you can just enter the name of a mobile game, and you can have access to all of the different user acquisition assets they use. It can be static, so it can be videos, even playable ads, but that gives you a good overview. Then the other type of analysis you want to have is the one from your game. So obviously you would know best because you spend so much time developing and crafting your precious game. But you want to make sure that you are well aware of who you designed it for, and that whoever you designed it for is going to find inside your game what is really motivating for them, right? So basically, you want to understand, to make sure that the player motivation that you assumed would be in your game are actually in your game, and these are the ones that are going to appeal to your players. And once you have those two analyses, the competitors / market analysis, and then you understand precisely what your player wants with your game, then now you can combine those two and you can start ideating and brainstorming and actually producing your assets. Always keeping in mind that you are targeting specific audiences and you are not targeting yourself. You often you will often get into this mindset of like, oh, but I don't like this. I don't think it looks good. It wouldn't appeal to me. If you're not in your target audience, don't even think about it. Just stick to your analysis. And this is why you do your analysis. So this is how you can build informed assumptions. And Ian, can you tell us a bit more about like benchmarking and all those first 3 steps?
Yeah, sure. I just wanted to give you I guess, easy tip on how to benchmark, because I think competitive analysis is incredibly important. And there are ways of accessing this information quite easily. So once you've decided, I guess, where you're going to launch, which countries you're going to launch in, you can easily access the Apple Store or the Google Play Store, go into the top charts, and basically the category you're going to be looking at in that country, when you see those first 3 positions, those are usually the most downloaded games, meaning probably the best performing competitors in the market. Additionally, you can use tools such as there's App Annie, there's Sensor Tower, Mobile Action. There's a bunch of these tools that obviously they have their own paid service, but what you can do is you can access top charts information for free on those, as well as I believe some review information that gives you an idea of what your competitors are doing well and what your competitors could be improving on, giving you ideas on exactly what you can improve in your game or the way you market it.
Oh yeah, definitely very precious information. People watching, pay attention to this. And then once you have built your informed assumptions and you have your creatives, what you want to do definitely is to know if your assumptions are actually of any value. So you want to get into the second stage, which is getting confirmed results. And this consists of 2 steps. The first one is you want to test. Testing is basically validating your concepts, right? You made an analysis, you made assumptions based on them, you created assets based on your assumptions, and now you want to test them and see how the market reacts. And once you have you've tested them, you will end up definitely with some top performing, less performing, and maybe some underperforming creative assets. And this is basically having your winners and having your losers. when you have your winners, this is one thing that is important. It doesn't stop here. You want to optimize the winning concepts, because there are always many things you can improve, things that may appeal more, even more to the audience, and variations and optimization are basically you take the winning concept and then you just try to iterate on, do I want a different background? Do I want to use a different character? Do I want to use a call to action? No call to action? You may even want to change the copy of the text if there is any text, and you can make variations on all of these and test them and see which one performed the best. Sometimes you will be very surprised because you will have your own assumptions, and a character that you think will not be appealing will actually be the one that is the top performing. So this is why you need to optimize once you have your winners, and that's a good way to save time and money. So on this point, Stephen, can you tell us a bit more about the testing and everything?
Yeah, look, I think we're going to go into some examples, so I won't go into depth here, but I think one thing to take away is we all have a good, follow your gut instincts. I think it's always very important to do that kind of thing. Follow your intuition. It's incredibly valuable. But you have to test things with data. At the end of the day, like that can get you so far. You need to test a lot of ideas, and you need to validate it with data. It's absolutely crucial at this stage, and obviously later as well. I'd probably introduce an idea of concepts being, I think about it in terms of a horizontal line and a vertical line, and kind of elaborate slightly on that. You may want to put 3-4 different concepts of creative out there. You want to run those. You want to see how the market reacts. And once you've kind of found that one concept, typically you find one, and as Clément said, like a winner. We kind of call those often like these kind of hero creatives. You can then think about it in a vertical line. In the vertical line, we'll be able to kind of really think about the different variations and iterations you can make on that particular concept. And maybe you want to take that concept that was the hero and actually change that concept a little bit. So like that's the approach I would take.
Yes, definitely. And it's very important that to understand this is really what it is about. And we'll see this later, the importance of testing and iterating. So this 5-step process, creative process, sorry, is really applicable to many different creative assets, pretty much anything that you want to test out there. We've seen in the previous slide that definitely for app store optimization, you would want your app icon, your store trailer, your screenshots to be tested. For your UA user acquisition, you will want to test different ads like static, which are just images, or you want to test video ads. But there's also like so much more you can test. Like Jan, you on WordHop, there was you used testing for a different element of the game.
Yeah, absolutely. So we definitely use it for quite a few parts of the store itself, especially. We tested a few app icons, for example, and you can do this quite easily in the Google Play Store store listing experiments. Additionally to that, you can utilize the UA creatives that you are running, which I think I'll touch upon a bit more later. But you can use these UA creatives to understand where your audience resonates best. So if, for example, here, if you take all these 4 names, put them in a UA creative, and then showcase that and try to figure out which ones are working best, that might be actually a good indication into going into the direction of that specific title.
Oh, definitely. And there are also like, not just these assets that we use like for no obvious promotion, or you want that your game title to be the most efficient, most performing, but there are also other type of creative assets that you will come up with, including the one that you could have on social medias. So Stephen, what's your point on your take on this?
Yeah, so I think this is the scale of importance. You've got to consider the timing. At an early stage, 100% front and center needs to be statics, videos, ASO. But I would encourage you thinking like, let's get this kind of social strategy started. Let's kind of set up the accounts. Let's kind of think about what that looks like. Because when you go into more of a soft launch or a main launch, then you're going to use that, those channels. also in different genres, right? If you're a hyper casual game, it's just really not going to make any difference because you need to test so quickly. Then if you've got a story game with a real narrative, then absolutely leverage social, right? This is a great way for you to get feedback and to get information back from what will eventually be your community of users. So in scale of importance, right at the early stage, I think focus first on as Jan was saying, the icon, the statics of videos, but definitely think around your social media from day one, because you're going to build upon that over time.
Definitely great episode of advice here. And so we talked about earlier we talked about the importance of testing, and this is a very crucial element. And you can see like testing is not, you see with Jan that testing is not just about putting out there different variations and options and just looking at which one is performing best. There are also a very interesting feedbacks that you can get that can even change or modify your game. So Jan?
Yeah, thanks very much. So yeah, as it says here, testing is everything. And the way I like to divide it is into two parts, the user acquisition part and the ASO part. So on the user acquisition side, you have the leverage of being able to test any of the ideas you have for the game, or any parts of the game, in fact, to acquire users and to drive that initial growth of your game. Now, in order to do this, you'll run your campaigns in whichever network of your choosing, and then you'll have to look at these pretty, I would say, utilized metrics in the industry. So, for example, if you are looking into how many people are interacting with your creative, you can look at the relationship between the impressions, the amounts of times you've seen showing this creative, and the clicks. So how many times a person has actually interacted with that ad, and that's called the click-through rate in general. And using that information, you can decide which of the ideas or which parts of the game specifically are the best showcase in order to acquire users. And you can also take those learnings into the ASO part, so the visibility in the store. And in this case, I think the visibility of the store is really important. One, so you can drive users from the creatives you're showing, but also in order to drive organic installs. So in this case, the more pleasing to the eye, or the more eye-catching, interesting these creatives in the store are, the more chances you have of driving more users for free. And in this case, you're able to get more insights on the game itself, because once these users are in your game, you can analyze their engagement and understand which parts of the game are working well for them and which ones might be, I don't know, maybe confusing or slightly, or maybe in the wrong area. Of course, it depends on the variation itself. But what I'm trying to say is you can use all this information to actually drive the development of your game and maybe make decisions along the way that you wouldn't have thought of before, but actually can form even a better path for your users. And at the end of the day, we just want the users to love the games, right?
Absolutely. This is the most important thing of all. If someone likes your game, this someone will stay in your game and will keep playing it. So that would be good news. Thanks a lot for this, Ian. On this topic, Steven, so again, CEO and co-founder of Lunar Labs, is going to give us his take on, the importance of testing and how him and his team actually help developers like you find solutions to this question. So, Steven.
Yeah, thanks. So, we've worked with developers of all kind of shapes and sizes, right? Specifically, we'll talk through some of the work we do with Tripledot, but the idea is, the audience here, we're talking indies, and what you'll find when you go out and start to build creative is, there are a lot of options in front of you. A lot of them are quite costly. It could be agencies, it could be kind of going and investing in more people to kind of do it. And it's quite a time-consuming exercise. It's so important as well. So, what we try to do is to kind of empower developers with software to be able to make these decisions a lot quicker and and the sort of the work that we've done with Tripledot, I think you look at it in a couple of stages. So really here we're talking about marketability. We're really trying to like leverage creative to kind of make some informed decisions as to, as Jan said, what do my users look like? How do they react? How can I maybe use that information to influence my, my game development, quite frankly? You're trying to get as much information as you can before you get to a soft launch, in which case you'll also be kind of gathering that data. We work with, at this stage I would advise certainly as an indie, focusing quite heavily on things like videos, gameplay videos, things which actually come directly from your code. And obviously the way in which we work, you're able to do that in Unity editor, which is quite nice. So it should be very, very familiar as opposed to having to go out and kind of learn a bunch of other things. And I would say with Tripledot, some of the things that we looked at were, the board types, different levels, different word combinations. We looked at the different kinds of UI that we'd put onto there, like things like install, different end cards. It's very, very important, and I think Clément touched on it before. You've got an opportunity as well to think about things like characters, and switching those out and seeing how they perform. You can even get quite creative with camera angles. Often that works really, really well at the beginning when you're doing marketability testing to really say, hey, maybe if I switch this up a little bit in Unity, I'm able to kind of create a new experience and perhaps leverage that in your game later. So that's the first stage. I would then say when you're then comfortable with what you have and you're going into a soft launch, an idea can be also introducing a playable ad. And a playable ad is, I'm sure most people are familiar, but it gives a representation of your game. You actually get to play the thing. So you get another level of data from the engagement of those playables as to the quality of the users that will go through. So, driving better LTV, lifetime value of a user. And that's really a really valuable asset to have in your kind of suite of assets when you go for soft and main launch. And the last point I'd make, guys, is that you can, in marketability testing, to a certain extent, you can get away with just kind of using the data you get back on installs from the different platforms, like the Facebooks. Unity will give you kind of information. But when you go into a soft launch and maybe you're going to spend a little bit of money on some UA, you need to consider having some kind of tool in there which will allow you to understand the source of the install and who, and that we call that attribution. There are good, you'll be able to look into this, but AppsFlyer, Adjust, and so on and so forth are there, and you need to have something like that in your testing when you go into soft and main launch.
Yes, definitely, and something we haven't addressed yet, but it's also important to understand that there is some sort of hierarchy between different types of creative assets. Images obviously are less costly to produce, but they are usually less efficient than videos, which are more costly, but they are less efficient usually than playable ads. I mean, like, how many times have I had like a playable ad and I'm like, okay, it's tempting. So you try to play it and I end up just downloading the game. It's like, okay, it's getting me much more because you're not passive. And I really like this. So now is the end of our session. I would like for the two of you to really give us, share with us what would be the key takeaway for our viewers. So we can begin with Stephen.
Yeah, cool. So my kind of top tip takeaway is, I've been in this industry for quite a long time, and I've seen the kind of changes in the platforms and the ability to be able to cohort out users and really be granular. And really what's happening in this world today, guys, is that you'll go to a platform, you have a bid, you have a price, you have a budget, and you have creative that you can put into these different platforms. Now the algorithms will do their work to help to find the kind of users that you want, but you won't be able to influence that as much as perhaps you could in the past. So one of the things which studios are really thinking about across absolutely all shapes and sizes is how can they really leverage creative, because that's the thing you can actually control, right? So really focus on the amount of creatives you can put into these platforms, because they do have hungry algorithms, but equally they absolutely inform the way in which you go forward as a studio.
It is so true. Thanks a lot. Jan, what would be your takeaway?
Yeah, I think what Steven said is spot on. And the only thing I could add on top of that, I think, is that you have to leverage your creatives to shape your game. I think we've mentioned quite a few times that it is important to use the data to drive the decisions. And if you find that your users are interacting with specific creatives or specific parts of the creatives, you can use that to develop your game, and you can use that to shape the way the game is going to be developed in the future. And I think it's a really important part of the whole creative process.
Yes, and that's one thing that I think is very interesting with mobile games and performance marketing, is that we can have this kind of retro feedback with the game itself. That's for sure. On my side, what I would say is like, always bear in mind that creative is essential. That's point one. Point two, that it needs to be data driven. Your decisions must, and I cannot stress this more, must be based on data that you collect, and they can't just be based on your gut feelings. And definitely, if we're always data driven, we'll make better assumptions and better, and we can test them. But also, don't lose perspective on what you're doing, because being data driven doesn't mean you have to be data obsessed. It doesn't mean that you should always focus and look through a tiny microscope to one or two specific KPIs that you think are very important, and then trying to beat the status quo at any cost, well, might actually in some cases damage your product, damage your brand, and the perceived value of what you're offering. So always, be mindful of looking at the big picture when you perform creative assets in UA. So as you may have seen, when you address the topic of creative assets for promotion and in mobile games, it's very difficult not to touch the topic of analytics. And well, I have good news for you. In a couple of weeks, we will be hosting a Unite Live session that will be directly addressing the importance of analytics, and it would be a bit more in-depth understanding of how analytics work and what you should get out of them. So thanks again for watching this session, and thanks a lot to our amazing guests that we had today. So thank you, Jan.
Thanks very much for having me.
It was a pleasure. And thank you, Steven, for being here too.
Thank you, Clément. Thanks for having me.
All right. Well, this is the end. And thanks to everybody. And we'll see you later in other sessions.